to another reading with Mr. White. Still on the Nowhere Emporium, and it's getting good, isn't it? Yes, it is. Right, we're on chapter 16 today, which is invitations. Quick update on chapter 15, which was Bazaar's Bazaar. Mr. Silver took Daniel out around the streets of Manhattan, which is in New York. They found a strange shop called Bazaar's Bazaar, and in there was loads of stuff, basically. And there was a strange shopkeeper that had a very strange voice, and he seemed to have what Mr. Silver was looking for. Mr. Silver handed him over big wad of dollar bills, and the shopkeeper did a deal with him and gave him what Mr. Silver was after. We don't know what it was, but hopefully we'll find out in chapter 16, which is called Invitations. Let's go. So, what was it? Asked Ellie, leading Daniel into the golden elevator in the Nowhere Hotel. What did he buy? I couldn't tell you, said Daniel. He rushed straight back to the Emporium and locked himself away. He shook his head. Something's not right, Ellie. I mean, you should have seen the way he acted in that shop, all aggressive and desperate. The elevator opened and they walked along a plush hotel hallway and knocked on the door to room 108. Yes, yes, coming, said a voice from inside. Why do we need Caleb and Anja to help us with a few invitations? Asked Daniel. Ellie smirked. You'll see. The door opened and the doorway was completely filled by the huge body of Caleb, the fire breather. He smiled down at Ellie. That time of year already, eh? He stepped aside, allowing Anja, the snake charmer, out of his room. She was holding a set of playing cards and she waved them in front of Caleb's face as she passed. Seems I'm on a roll, she said. Remind me, Caleb, what was the final score? Caleb muttered something under his breath, then shut the door with a bang and said, Oh, let's go before Anja's head becomes too big to fit through the lobby. Ooh. They made their way from the opulence of the Nowhere Hotel to the cold, sparkling emptiness of the Emporium's corridors. In the great hallway of the staircases, they climbed up and up flights of stairs, moving and grumbling around them until they arrived in what seemed to be a huge stockroom. On one side, the high walls were stacked with rack upon rack of glittering clothes in shades of orange and gold and black. On the other, a great variety of black iron bird cages sat on wooden shelves. All were empty. There was a table where Mr. Silver's magpies sat preening their glistening wings. Beside them was a high pile of black envelopes. Aren't these the invitations Mr. Silver was writing yesterday? Daniel asked. Yep. You want me to take them to the post office? Ellie gave a laugh. No, it's fine, she said. We'll send them the usual way. Well, what's that? You'll see. Take a seat at the desk and yell out the name written on the first envelope, will you? Daniel held the invitation in his hands and he watched Ellie stroll over to the high racks of clothes, followed closely by Caleb and Anja and the magpies. There were ladders on rails attached to the racks so that you could climb up and move freely along the rows. This one says, Mr. Radcliffe Bone, he yelled. Ellie gave a nod and began to climb the ladder, moving back and forth along the rows of clothes, with the magpies flapping around her head. This'll do, she said, reaching up for a glistening black suit studded with glowing orange stones. She held the suit out for the magpies, and the birds swooped down and snatched it from her hands, dropping it onto the counter in front of Daniel. What now? He asked. Lay the clothes out on the table and put the invitation on top. Daniel laid the suit out as best he could. He placed the envelope on top. No sooner had the paper touched the material than the suit began to move, arranging itself one fold at a time into a tightly packed shape. When the final fold was complete, the suit was no longer just a suit. It was a bird. The material had arranged itself into the form of a huge raven with wings of shining black silk and a beak studded with amber stones. Its eyes were two large orange buttons. Ellie, is this suit supposed to turn into a bird? Of course, Ellie's reply was casual, as though this was perfectly ordinary. Grab it and put it on one of the cages before it tries to fly off. The crow was already spreading its huge wings. Daniel snuck towards it. It stared at him with button eyes. He made a leap towards the bird and wrapped his arms around it. Then he carried it, flapping and thrashing, to one of the cages stacked nearby. When the cage was locked, he wiped the sweat from his brow, and gazed up at Ellie, who was clearly having a great time watching him struggle.
"Good job, Daniel,"
said Caleb, who was climbing a rack of his own.
"Now, back to work. We've only got another 150 to go."
That night, as the clock ticked towards midnight, Daniel, Ellie, Caleb and Anja carried 151 cages to the front of the shop. Caleb and Andrew, of course, could not pass through the red curtain. Several times Daniel saw Caleb eagerly snatching a glimpse through the curtain towards the window to the real world. When all of the cages had been brought, Caleb and Anja headed off back towards the Nowhere Hotel. "You want to play some more cards?" Anja said as they walked away.
No way."
Caleb waved his hands in front of him.
"I've already been humiliated enough."
We could play something more suited to your small brain," said Anja. "Snap, maybe?" Daniel chuckled to himself as they disappeared from sight. "Hey, a little help in here." Through the curtain to the shop, Ellie was arranging the cages. They didn't only contain birds. The costumes had also folded into shimmering black cats and huge golden rats, silken foxes and velvet bats, each fashioned with glistening materials in the colours of All Hallows Eve. Mr. Silver was absent, as Daniel had come to expect, but Ellie assured him her father had given his word he would be attending the ball. "Well, we're cutting it close," said Daniel, noting that the many Emporium clocks pointed to 5 minutes to midnight, and then it struck him that the shop, usually alive with the whirring and ticking of clockwork, had become silent. Every clock had stopped. Ellie carried the first cage to the Emporium entrance and opened the door to the freezing New York night. She unlocked the cage. An orange velvet cockatiel with sparkling diamond eyes launched into dark, its wings silent against the midnight air. Cage by cage, Daniel and Ellie released the animals, each headed towards the address scrawled upon the invitation at its heart. Every invitation arrived at its destination. From modest apartments to grand townhouses and hotels, they squeezed through letterboxes or down chimneys or through open windows. They snuck to the bedrooms of the invited guests and unfolded at the foot of their beds. The invited guests did not know what had awakened them from their dreams, or even if they were really awake at all. They discovered mysterious envelopes that contained small black cards promising the chance of a lifetime, the opportunity to attend an enchanted ball. And they found clothes, ball gowns of deepest black velvet and burning orange silk, crystal tiaras decorated with flourishes of gold, diamond rings and gold necklaces, tuxedos and top hats and tails, each item fitting perfectly as if made to measure. When they were dressed, the guests made their way through the streets, down towards the Emporium like sleepwalkers through enchanted dreams. They approached the shop and came together, standing silently in neat rows, neither asleep nor awake. None of them noticed when Vindictus Sharp slipped from the shadows and joined the gathering crowds. Uh-oh! He was not attired in Halloween shades like everyone else. He wore a finely tailored suit, the colour of charcoal, and carried a silver-topped cane. His silver hair and moustache were neat, and his eyes were an unnatural, electric blue. We haven't seen him for ages, have we? Ooh! Strolling through the queue, Sharp selected one of the guests, reaching over an elderly man's shoulder, plucking the invite from his hand. He whispered something into the man's ear, and at once the old man turned and began to walk dreamily away from the Emporium, heading for home. When every guest was present, the frozen clocks kicked back to life, filling the night with their ticking. The Emporium's delicate golden gate turned to dust and scattered in the crisp New York breeze. The queue began to filter in. Sharp moved up the line in silence. Guests were disappearing behind a heavy red velvet curtain, awakening as they crossed the threshold. There were 2 doormen on the other side, collecting tickets and directing wonder-struck guests towards the ballroom. Sharp handed over his stolen ticket and walked past them. He was in. Oh my! Oh, that's the end of the chapter. I hate it when a chapter ends like that. Oh, what's going to happen next? So Vindictus Sharp is back. Haven't seen him for a long time. I think the last time we saw him, wasn't he having an argument with what we think was Lucy and Silver when they were much, much younger? So we'll have to see what happens next. But he's managed to sneak his way into this ball. And I don't think it's going to end well. Do you? Let me know in the comments below what you think is going to happen. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And in fact, I know you're going to come back for chapter 17, which is called Ghosts. See you next time. Bye.